Today I want to take a look at how to make a simple to-do list application with Angular CLI. Here we're looking at the finished product. We have our heading to-do list. We have an archive button which will remove anything that's completed. It's showing that 2 out of 3 are not yet done. So this one that's checked here, second, that would be the one removed during an archive. And then we have an add operation where we can add a new item to the list. And of course, there's a delete icon for each row to remove them. So this allows us to do the major CRUD operations and manage a simple to-do list. Part of the reason this is such a great demo is that it allows the array management of the 4 CRUD operations and kind of shows us how to attach things to the UI. So the data binding, the event handling, and some of the fundamentals that we would need for any large application. So to get started, what we're going to do is the ng command line. This is the Angular CLI, and we're going to do ng new, and I'm going to call it ng2 to do. The ng space new command is how we instantiate a new project. It's going to give us our unit testing.spec files. It will create the TS TypeScript files for the component, and it'll also have the HTML view for the presentation. So with the command line complete, we now have a new folder called ng2 to do, and I can navigate over there and open up Visual Studio Code. So we'll type code space dot enter, and that'll open Visual Studio Code in the current folder. We'll go ahead and close out this in the background. So now we're looking at Visual Studio Code. I do know that on this project I'm going to need an extra dependency, so I'll do npm install font-awesome --save. That'll go ahead and bring in the font awesome dependency, load that package in our local folder. On our source application, we're going to have app, and then this is where we're going to see our main rendering for our application. Back on the command line, as soon as the npm install finishes, we'll open the localhost 4200 website, and that'll give us a rendering of our project. We'll do that with ng space serve. So we type in ng space serve. That's going to open up browser sync with a small HTTP web server to the folder we're working from. It gives us a presentation where we can see the application. We get the live reloading that as we're making changes, the GUI is going to blink and refresh. It allows us to do our debugging on the front end while we're making changes on the back. So here we have our application running. Welcome to ng2 to do, and we'll move that over to the left. And I am running this in a special Chrome profile that has CORS disabled, the disable web security. I do that for API calls, and what that essentially does is allows me to make HTTP calls to other endpoints without worrying about the CORS permission headers, in a development setting. Could certainly add those, and they're wonderful things and great for security and production and higher environments. But whenever I'm doing debug, I do like to run a Chrome instance without CORS. So we have the website up and running, and just to test that, what we're going to do is change the title to the word hello, save it, and it auto refreshes, which is fantastic. We'll go ahead and empty out the entire view. Now we're down to nothing at all. So at this point, what I'll go ahead and do is build out the to-do list wireframe for kind of the presentation. And we're using some Zen coding here. So input :text. This is the emit abbreviations and shortcuts that we have, things like a text, a submit button. We can go ahead and add those in. That'll be our GUI for our adding data. We'll do a link up at the top, of course, and that's going to have our archive that we saw earlier in the demo of the completed product. And we will have something like a remain function out of todos.length. So that's our placeholder for what those will look like. And we can move a little bit further down, do an unordered list with an li that has an input within it. And also on that, we can do an I tag with fa trash. Yep. And that's kind of our rendering for our bullet point, which we'll see here in a little bit. And we'll go ahead and add another input for the checkbox. So that's kind of our basic GUI. Now, of course, we need logic to go behind it, and we also have a dependency to register. So on the app module TS, one of the things we're going to need to do, because we're doing data binding, is import the forms module. So let me see here, forms module from @angular/forms. And you gotta love the IntelliSense, the autocomplete. In Visual Studio Code, one of the plugins that I'm running that's so helpful for this is the Angular Essentials from John Papa. And this loads a lot of things in the background we need for IntelliSense and autocomplete when we're working on Angular projects. So be sure to have that loaded in the background. So down here on the imports, we can go ahead and load forms module. And we can bring that in, go ahead and save. Now for that dependency to take effect, we do need to go to the command line and go ahead and break out of the compiled project and do a brand new ng-serve and kind of instantiate that HTTP web server from the beginning. Okay, the new ng-serve completed. Right, and we have our forms module dependency now. Another thing I want to take a look at is the angular.json file. This has a lot of the configuration for the Angular CLI, and in here we have a style to our custom CSS just for our application. I want to go ahead and add a little bit more to this, and what we're going to do is have node modules font awesome /CSS/ I believe it is font-awesome.css. And don't worry about the minified version, the .min for this. We can use the original full version, and that'll work out okay. Because what we're trying to do is just bring in that raw CSS to make it part of the Webpack pipeline, that when ng-serve is doing its file watcher, when it's doing its bundling and minification, we want to make sure it's including the font awesome library. Beautiful. Now, as subtle as it is, we see the trash can icon here, which means that we did the right thing and we have that working, and that's now part of our GUI. In fact, let me go ahead and throw away the input submit, and let's make a new button tag, and we'll do add is going to be the word for it. And in this, we're going to have a class of FA+. And see, for that, we now have a slightly better looking add button with a plus icon. So we want to leverage those icons wherever we can to make our interface more user-friendly. Okay, cool. So we have a couple dependencies. We did the forms module for the app module TS TypeScript. And in the Angular JSON, we went ahead and included a dependency to the font awesome library. We've got our app component for some of the rendering and the presentation. Now what we want to do is go ahead and take care of the app component TS for a lot of the logic. Now from a data storage perspective, our primary variable here is going to be the to-dos array, which includes a lot of the fundamental storage for our application. So we want to say things like first, second, third can be some sample data to begin our array. Now in a live application, of course, this is going to be an API call going out to some sort of endpoint data source. And while that's helpful, today we are looking at just starting it with kind of local static data. And that's really a good development technique, that it allows you to get the feel of the application, the look and the event handling. What do I do when I click a button? How do the drop downs connect? Sort of the local features of an application before we get too far into the rest of it. And definitely for the storage of data on the new interface, we want to go ahead and include that. Now in here, we're going to have a function for remain. And this will be a for each on our this.todos. And so we're going to loop through that particular array. And we can use letter T for the single. I personally like to use single letter for my iterator inside of a loop. So if my parent object is to-dos, I like my iterator to be the letter T. That sort of works for me. And here we can say if to do is not done, then C++ for a count, we can return C. And up here, we can say let C equal 0. And that helps us to go ahead and put together our first function. Now, from a debug standpoint, our application is not yet showing us data. The command line compilation seems fine, but we are getting a couple of things here on the front end. And Angular 2, the error messages are just so much better, more detail, more specific. So here I can see I have a typo. There's a little bitty number 2 on the plus icon that should not be there. And the F12 console in Chrome does a beautiful job of highlighting that debug experience. So if we save and reload, I'm now seeing out of 3, which is great because that means it's pulling in the length. Now on the presentation side, this needs to be ng4 equals t, let t of to-dos. There we go. Now we're getting repetition. And for the data binding, we want to do our ng model equals t.done for the checkbox. Because if you remember on the TypeScript, the app component TS, one of these items I did mark as true done, the one in the middle. And we are seeing that over here. And we're seeing 3 items for our array. So we know some of our data binding is coming through, which is fantastic. In this particular project, it's kind of warning me about double quotes, single quotes. We'll go ahead and replace that out to clean it up. And that's simply to get the warning counts down to 0. Makes it easier to see legitimate issues that might come up. So with that ng model binding done for the checkbox, we'll go ahead and add another one for the name, for the display of the value. Beautiful. And for the event handler here, I'm going to add a click, and we're going to run a delete function with the current item, but really the index number is what I'm going to want. And up here, I can say let I equal index. And just to test that out, what we will do is go ahead and display the letter I inside of handlebars. So over here we have I in double braces, and on the left-hand side we also see I, 0, 1, and 2. That's coming from let I equal index. And the word index is a special keyword that we are saving into our own variable letter I, and we'll use that for the delete function. Now right now it is giving me a warning, it says unknown method delete. That's fantastic. I mean, the amount of coaching, IntelliSense, and kind of built-in error handling that the Angular 2 CLI is giving us is absolutely fantastic. That these are things you normally wouldn't catch later until you're running the live application. You may not catch them at all. The TypeScript and the linting that this provides is absolutely fantastic. So here what we'll see is this .todos.splice provided the index, and we're going to splice out a single item. So go ahead and save that. So back over here on the front end, it should change to tell us that that particular dependency is now well defined. So we're to 0 warnings in the bottom left corner. Del no longer has an underline. And over here, if I clicked an item, it does in fact delete the one item I clicked, which is really cool. So, all right, beautiful. At this point, we have the remain, we've got the delete. We can go ahead and define archive, bring that in. And with archive, we basically want to remove everything that's deleted. So in that case, what we're looking at is sort of holding an old to-dos variable for the current data set. And then we take this .todos and we empty it, make it empty array. And we'll say old to-dos dot for each, and we can do another iterator looping through our array. Yeah, get that part cleaned up. Okay, and we'll say if the to-do is not done, then what we want to do is say this dot todos dot push letter T. And so we're going to push into the array things which aren't done. Because we're not modifying the array, it wants me to use constant instead of let as a keyword. That's fine, we can do that. So on our GUI for the link here, we need to do two things. The href is going to go to JavaScript void, okay, and the click event is going to go to the archive handler in Angular. There we are. So if I reload the application, I check the last two items and hit archive, I'm now down to the first one only. And of course I can do a single delete. This is really cool. On the remain function, we have let C, if not done, C++, return C is going to go down here actually. Beautiful. So we have 2 out of 3. So this part is complete. This part is complete. The data binding is complete. Application's coming together very well. We'll go ahead and remove that index number from the delete icon. Our next handler needs to be the submit on the form down here. And we're going to run that to a function called add. So back over in our TypeScript, we'll make a new function called add. Go ahead and put this in here. And what we want to do is that the new to do, this dot var, we'll say let t equal name this dot new to do done is false. So this is sort of our default value of how we instantiate a new item. And on the array, this dot to do's dot push letter t. Beautiful. We'll say this dot new to do equals double single quote and save. It is giving me never reassigned, so use constant instead. And that just helps with the legibility of the code. So there's a good question here. Why does TypeScript, why does it keep bothering me to say constant? Like that this is a constant and this one's a constant. I can use the let keyword like I did with my counter up here in remain. Why does it care so much about constant? Code is read more than it's written. Reading comprehension, legible code, is the primary goal when we're creating these things. That we want them to be extraordinarily easy to read. We don't want people to have to double back or kind of, squint their eyes or look more careful or something to understand. We want the clarity of the code on the first read. So that's part of why constant is helpful. Okay, so with that saved, I want to go ahead and run a test over here with more ideas now. And it is adding, but where is my data? I don't really see the values. It's adding rows, but not values in the way I would expect. And if I go ahead and look at sources, this is a good opportunity for a brief debug. So in the app component TS, which is one of the beautiful things about Angular CLI, by the way, is that we're in debug mode and we can see the TypeScript on the front end and set breakpoints and do all that beautiful stuff inside of Chrome. So over here, I'm trying to push a to-do. If I hit the breakpoint and I inspect variable t, I see nothing on the name. And this .new to do is lacking a name descriptor as well. Kind of interesting. And this does say running in development mode, which helps us with the debugging of TypeScript. So go ahead and go through that. It's interesting. The value is kind of pulling through empty. So over here on the front end, we have add. That's fine. There's nothing bound for modeling. Okay, that's really important, and we need to add that. So here we want to go ahead and do ng model, new to do, save it. Excellent, definitely need that. And I'll go ahead and do the breakpoint again. Still empty. Interesting. Now on the console, we see an error message, and it says, if ng model is used within a form tag, the name attribute must be set. And so the error messages we're getting with Angular and with the Angular CLI are fantastic here. So it's telling me that I never set the name attribute. Okay, fair enough. We can go ahead and set a name attribute. So I put that in, save the application, reload, do more, hit our breakpoint. Ah, now we're seeing a value. Okay, very good. So if I go ahead and do ideas and let that continue, you can see the numbers changing, the checked quantities changing for how many remain. I can do archive, I can do single delete, I can put more things on here and go ahead and continue. At this point, really remove the breakpoint. Console is clean, no errors here, which is beautiful. And we really have our application complete and running. So that's how we can make a simple to-do list using the Angular CLI and a little bit of TypeScript, plus some debugging and dependency management with the Font Awesome library. Again, as a reminder, that was something that was added here in the styles part of the Angular JSON, and we do have to restart the ng serve on our command line here in the background. That for this project to run, all we do is type in ng space serve, and that gives us our localhost website on 4200. Thanks for watching.